Hey, it's Rick Kettner here, and today we're going to be taking a quick tour of the studio. This is easily one of the most requested video ideas that we've had on the channel in the comment section. And so because we're about to hit 10,000 subscribers on the channel, or by the time you're watching this video, we will likely have reached 10,000 subscribers, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to deliver on this very popular video idea. So in this episode, we're going to be covering three things: the bookshelves, the studio gear, and the filming process. So there'll be something for everybody. For those of you that are simply interested in the books, we'll talk a little bit about the books. For those of you interested in the gear and everything that we use to film these videos, we'll talk about that. And finally, for anybody out there that might be curious about what goes in to filming these kinds of videos, we'll talk a little bit about the filming process. But let's begin with the bookshelves. Let me start by saying that yes, the bookshelves are real. It's not a green screen or anything like that. That is something that some people have mentioned in the past. The bookshelves are real, but somewhat ironically is the fact that I rarely read books in physical form. My favorite way to consume books is first by listening to audiobooks while I'm out on a walk or something like that. And then when I find a book that I find really interesting or really compelling and perhaps worthy of covering in a summary here on the channel, that's when I'll pick up a digital copy for my Kindle or for the Kindle app on my iPad and go through and take meticulous highlights in preparation for putting together a summary or a reading list or something like that. So somewhat ironically, I often end up buying 3 separate copies so that I can go through the audiobook, go through the digital book, and ultimately have a physical copy that I can hold up when doing a summary or a reading list or something like that. Now, before I started this channel, I did have one compelling reason to buy physical books, and that is to serve as visual cues around the house so that my kids would understand how important books and reading are to me, and perhaps that might influence them to see reading as an important hobby or an important thing that they could take up as well. But when I started this channel and as I started to build this studio and I worked with Kyle, my producer and editor, on putting this entire scene together, that gave me a really big excuse to start spending a lot more money on physical books. So I started to buy all kinds of books that I had enjoyed in the past, and I started to buy books that I thought would be interesting. So where we are today is I've read most of the books on the bookshelf behind me, but I haven't read all of them. Some portion of them are still on my reading list, which is great because there's always more to dive into. There's always other interesting topics that I'm encouraged to check out at some point in the future. Now, I'm a fan of reading a wide range of subjects, well beyond just the business categories that we typically cover here on the channel. I find it's very interesting to read about all kinds of things that don't directly apply either to business or even to personal growth, just out of curiosity, and to find interesting connections between previously disconnected ideas, and just to broaden my horizons and explore things that I find interesting. So in addition to the typical business subjects that I cover here on the channel, like startups, business strategy, marketing, product development, leadership, and even subjects like productivity, I also like to dive into completely unrelated subjects like tech history and human history, and things like mental models and artificial intelligence, and even human psychology. There are all kinds of interesting subjects out there that are worth exploring. And one thing that I strongly recommend is, even if you have very limited reading time, every once in a while, mix things up and choose a topic that you're simply curious about. One that doesn't necessarily apply to your business goals or your personal growth goals, but is just interesting to you, and take some time to explore unexpected things. And oftentimes there's much to be gained and some unexpected benefits to just exploring things that you're interested in. Not every book has to have an immediate way to be applied in your everyday life, and I find there's a lot of benefit in simply exploring interesting subjects. But anyway, let's continue on to studio gear. when it comes to filming these videos, the setup here is pretty straightforward. I have a Sony a7 III camera with a Sony 24-105 lens on it. The microphone here is a Shure SM7B microphone, a very popular microphone amongst podcasters, really good for vocals and that sort of thing. Now, both the camera and the microphone are hooked into external recorders that I have over here to the side. So there's a Atomos Ninja Flame external video recorder that records everything from the camera. And then we have a Sound Devices Mix Pre 6 that is used to capture the audio. And it actually routes the audio also into the Atomos Ninja Flame for recording alongside the video. But we do tend to record video and audio separately, and then Kyle will put them together in the post-production process and add other visuals and other enhancements like that to create the final product, the final video. But we prefer to use these external recorders because they're quickly accessible here on the side. Then we have 6 studio lights around that light up everything. Now, typically for a set like this, you really only need 3, maybe 4 lights, but because I prefer to have these lights a little bit dimmer, so I'm not being absolutely blinded by them, and because we do have the shelves behind me that are ways back and they need to be lit up fairly well, 6 lights kind of provide everything that we need to keep not only me lit here, but the bookshelves behind me lit and highly visible. And so we have 2 main lights and then 4 smaller lights. They're all Aputure brand lights, I believe. I'll include a lot more of the details, the specific pieces of gear that we have. I'll list all those things in the video description box, so be sure to check that out if you're interested in the actual models and some of the more specific details. But one thing worth noting is that when it comes to creating a better picture quality, especially if you're filming in 4K, the lighting really matters. Making sure that you're well lit. Even a mediocre camera is going to perform far better if you're well lit and if the set is well lit. So definitely keep that in mind if you're interested in putting together videos like this. But that's what we have for lighting. And then finally, I have my MacBook Pro 16-inch here. This is a relatively recent upgrade. So originally I had a 13-inch MacBook Pro from 2018 that I've been using, but very recently I upgraded to this model. It is the new MacBook 16-inch from 2021 with Apple Silicon. So it's a lot faster, much more capable. The main reason I upgraded from the 13 to the 16 is that I don't travel that much. And here in the studio especially, it's really handy to have a much bigger screen because occasionally I am referring down to my notes either between takes or sometimes I can get away with it right in the middle of a take. And so having my notes kind of zoomed in where it's highly visible on a larger screen just makes everything much more comfortable. But anyway, that's basically it for the gear. I mean, we have tripods and stands like that, but nothing special. It's just camera, microphone, external recorders, laptop, and lights. And that's basically it for the gear. Now, when it comes to the filming process, this is something that has evolved a lot over the past couple of years. In the early days, we had multiple camera angles. Kyle would be here the entire time we were filming. He would be managing the cameras, setting focus, lining everything up, kind of monitoring the shots, monitoring the recording process. But more recently, with work from home being more of a necessity and just wanting to have this whole setup be much easier and more straightforward, Kyle and I worked together to really simplify the way that I shoot videos. And now I'm fully able to shoot the videos here on my own. Then I take the audio and video files, sync them over remotely, where Kyle can then do editing from home and finish the final product and upload it to YouTube. So the set here is a lot simpler than it was in the past. Again, I have my external video and audio recorder right here within reach. So quite literally, I come into the studio, I put down my laptop, maybe I gather a few relevant books if it's a reading list or something like that. I turn on the lights and I sit down and I start the recording process. And that's it. And I do several takes oftentimes, and then Kyle will take those video files, stitch everything together, and then you end up with the final result. But pretty straightforward filming process. Unfortunately, the camera that I'm using here has really good autofocus, so we don't have to worry about that. The audio recorder does an excellent job of catching everything there. There's really not a lot of variables. One thing that you might find interesting is that the lamps back there that seem to be turned on right now aren't actually on, because originally we found they cast light that reflected off the desk into the camera and it didn't look really good. So now what we do is after I'm done filming, I go and turn on the lamps behind me, and then Kyle will edit just the lamps into the bookshelf so you get the look of lamps on in the bookshelf, but we don't get the awkward reflection off the desk. Just one of those little tricks that Kyle came up with to make the set look more attractive, and it's a pretty straightforward way to solve that little problem. But anyway, that's a behind the scenes look at the studio and how everything comes together. A look at the bookshelf, a little bit of talk about the studio gear, and then finally a few details on how we go about filming videos. Now, if you're interested in this sort of thing, we are going to be doing another episode relating to this in the future because we're about to move this studio. Same setup, same gear, but we're moving from our current space to an entirely new studio in, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks from now. And so we're going to film the process of taking down this studio, taking down all the books, taking down all the lights, taking down everything, and then the setup on the other side and putting everything back up and getting it all back functional. And at the end of the day, if everything goes smoothly, the overall look should be very similar to what you're seeing now, but we're going to be in a new space. And so again, those of you that may be interested in that sort of thing, we are going to be publishing a video on the studio move. But that's it for this episode. If you have any questions or comments about anything that I covered here in this episode, or perhaps anything that I failed to cover here in the episode, let me know down in the comment section. And of course, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you're interested in catching that future episode where we talk about the studio move. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the next episode.